I think we're gonna do a weird one this week, but I think that's mighty fine. I'm gonna try to make sure we're keeping it focused on a pretty important topic, which I've been talking about with friends. I've been talking about with family. I've been talking about with people that I meet at random events and networking stuff. Just stuff about how you keep yourself focused when you get distracted, right? It's all that I'm trying to care about is we don't we really are finding more and more ways that inhibit our ability to determine fact from fiction in ways that we're not really ready for. We talk about this in terms of how we, identify the credibility of media from AI and whatnot, the credibility of our own thoughts from plagiarism to the misuse of copyright. Is how do we handle all of these factors coming at us at once? How do we make sure that when we're talking to each other, we're not bearing witness to how horrible we don't focus, okay? It's June, so things are getting warmer. Vibes are a little bit better. Some of you done with a winter. I don't know. For me, it's a pretty good time, but it's a time that, for me, I get to really stretch this muscle, where I'm getting to travel a good amount. There's lots of events happening, and I get to talk about this idea a lot. And every conversation I have, it's reminding me kind of how valuable keeping an eye on this idea is, keeping an eye on how much you need to care about what you're focusing on. And I hate how nebulous that sounds, but it is important, and I really think it is, okay? I really think it's important that people really think about what it means by a society that's run by buyer beware. At least for us in America, how often you are the victim of someone else's game, okay? And that is why focusing matters so much. It's because when we allow the lack of details to kind of guide us, when we allow the blurriness to be what we're most confident in, you set yourself up for failure. You set a nation up for failure, I argue. What is going on when we have people fighting so strongly, when we have a lot of conversations recently in terms of education, a lot of terms about a fight over a view of education, of being educated, and in why we have to question ourselves when that becomes a focal point of someone's agenda, like, period. And I understand the talking points that get circulated, speaking about, in this instance, say, funding being removed from certain institutions, or certain legislation, or certain, policy dictating the well-being of certain educational institutions. It's fascinating. It's new to me, obviously, but it's changes in the world where we've always respected that powerful things are possible. People can take over worlds in ways, but I didn't think they'd come from me. And like, the stupidest fucking way to say that, right? But it's sort of like a lot of people are falling on the called bluff. I say it's falling upon, like, okay, shit, they did have 2 aces, or whatever you want to say for whatever game you're playing. What do you do in a world where, even though it seemed like all of the steak was sizzle, right? There's still shit happening that hurts so much in institutions that are being touched that haven't been handled this way before. And how, going from the big picture, trying to stay focused on how unfocused we get pulled in messed with. And in these cases where there's big ticket issues, which our administration is trying to focus and sort of have effect on, but it it's going after institutions of the nation for education, right? It's going after funding, which promotes scientific efforts, which have proven their steadfast efforts pretty well. At least, like, you know, I do forfeit that we always want more. We always want more about our systems, but the important thing is to respect that it's a system. It's not just, I light a firecracker, oh, and it's a dud. Well, we should throw away that entire brand. It's no, you should figure out what builds the best firecrackers so that you minimize your duds. Because yes, duds are a reality of life, and we can't just blow up our world because something might not be working absolutely perfectly, understood, right? And that's why when we have a world in which people are influenced so easily, when it's hard to have people really subscribe to an agenda, which in all intents and purposes, we don't want people to have a centralized vision of success, a centralized vision of what they can become, but do we want a centralized vision of what we are working for or what we are working towards when we evaluate things? Why do we let people speak so haphazardly? Even though I'm a fucking hypocrite, I'm speaking pretty stupidly about this stuff, but I'm just journaling. I'm just having a time. Why do we allow on our systems, in which are now amazing digital systems, whether it be our YouTube, of course, whether it be Reddit, whether it be TikTok, Instagram, all of these things, why do we allow so much gunk, so much junk? Why are my ads not for local businesses in the most cheap and simple way? Why are the 30 seconds that I have to spend on my favorite app watching an ad, why does it have to be some shitty company for a video game built in a different country that is not getting the funds for something that matters, in my opinion? The stupid goddamn Bejeweled 15 app that I'm looking at doesn't matter to me, my life, my family, and stuff. And so if we could focus, aka make it so all facets of our life that influence us, namely our social media presence, that's the simplest one that I can talk about, let it touch locally a little bit more. Why don't we watch and give our consumers more of a give a fuckable behavior, attitude? You know what I mean? It's so easy to just say fuck ads because they never really are feel well-intentioned. They're sort of scummy, they're shitty. What if it's my favorite fucking restaurant in Minneapolis? I go to Listo's. Listo's, if you could sponsor this channel somehow, even though like there would be no reason to. I love those food options. I bring all my friends, I make sure we cater from there. That's what I love. I don't like going to Chick-fil-A. I don't like when all of our friends are like, we should go to Chick-fil-A. But you love those things and you can't like walk away from them. And that's what's so tough when you try to get people to think about this shit. And I don't work here. The point is, focusing on what you really care about is what we don't do. Small, consistent effort is what we don't do. We don't like to be bored. We don't like to think we're going nowhere. And when you're not getting sugar and you're only trained on mountains of sugar, you're not going to reward yourself for the right things. And that's something I try to iterate over and over, is that I don't think our media, I don't think our fellow people reward the right behavior. I think we reward things accidentally. Maybe we don't recognize how much we reinforce so much behavior that in retrospect we so abhorrently dislike. So I ask, help me learn how to speak about being focused better, and not in ways of, oh, I did my dishes and then I did this. It's try to surround yourself with things you give a fuck about. Try to surround yourself with people you give a fuck about. Try to stop being controlled as to what you give a fuck about. And that's what I struggle with, and that's why I talk about it a bit. It's a perfect crime.